The blood-red sunset painted Sweetwater Creek's dusty Main Street as Vivian O'Malley stood shivering in the bitter October wind, clutching her last loaf of bread with trembling fingers. $1 that was all she needed to keep the tax collector from her door for another week. But the townspeople hurried past with averted eyes, their own troubles weighing heavily as the drought of 1878 stretched into its second year. Vivian had never imagined this would be her life. At 26, she was supposed to be surrounded by children in a warm home, not standing on a street corner with an empty stomach and desperation in her eyes. It had been 8 months since the influenza took Thomas, leaving her with nothing but debts and broken dreams in this unforgiving Wyoming territory. "Last loaf," she called, her voice barely carrying over the wind. "Fresh bake this morning." It was a lie. The bread was from yesterday, the last of her flour gone. She'd used the remaining kindling to heat the oven, and now she stood with nothing left to sell tomorrow. The wooden sign around her neck scratched against her collarbone. "Widow's bread $1. How fresh?" The deep voice startled her, and Vivian turned to face a tall stranger, his features shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Dust covered his long coat, and a week's worth of beard darkened his jaw. A cowboy, judging by the worn leather chaps and the spurs that clinked softly as he shifted his weight. "Baked it at dawn, sir," Vivian lied again, clutching the loaf tighter. The man's eyes, a startling blue against his sun-weathered skin, studied her face. Vivian felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. His gaze dropped to the loaf, then to her thin coat and the worn boots visible beneath her skirt. "What's your name?" he asked, reaching inside his coat. "Vivian O'Malley." She straightened her shoulders, determined to maintain some dignity. "Mrs. Betty O'Malley?" The man nodded, producing a leather wallet. "Seems a fair price for bread in these parts," he said, but instead of a single dollar, he pulled out a $5 gold piece and held it out. Vivian stared at the coin. "Sir, I cannot—" "I have been riding for 3 days straight," he interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "Good bread is worth its weight in gold when you have been eating trail dust. Consider it a fair transaction." His eyes met hers again, and something in them, kindness, perhaps, or understanding, made her throat tighten. Slowly, she accepted the coin and handed him the bread. "Thank you, Mr. C. Ross. Riley Ross." He tipped his hat. "Just passing through." Before she could respond, a commotion further down the street drew their attention. Sheriff Donovan was escorting a man in handcuffs toward the jailhouse, a crowd gathering to watch. "Looks like they caught one of the Murphy gang," Riley observed. "Might be worth knowing what's happening." Without waiting for her response, he gently took her elbow and guided her toward the crowd. Vivian should have pulled away. Proper widows didn't accompany strange men, but the warmth of his hand through her thin sleeve and the weight of the gold coin in her pocket gave her courage. "Sheriff caught him trying to sell that stolen Morgan stallion," a townsman explained to the gathering crowd. "Rest of the gang's still out there with the other horses." Riley's grip on Vivian's elbow tightened slightly. "The Murphy boys have been stealing horses all across the territory," he murmured. "Nasty business." "Do you know them?" Vivian asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Know of them. They don't leave witnesses." As the crowd dispersed, Riley glanced at the darkening sky. "Mrs. O'Malley, may I see you home? Streets aren't the safest after that gang's been spotted nearby." Propriety demanded she refuse. Widows didn't walk with strange men, especially not handsome cowboys with intense blue eyes, but fear of the empty house, of the coming night with no food for tomorrow, of the Murphy gang won out. "Thank you, Mr. Ross. It's not far." They walked in silence down the muddy side street where Vivian's small house sat at the edge of town. Once a source of pride, the little white clapboard structure now seemed to sag under the weight of neglect. The front porch steps creaked ominously as they approached. "This is me," she said, suddenly embarrassed by the peeling paint and the broken fence pickets. Riley surveyed the property, his expression unreadable. "You live here alone, Mrs. O'Malley?" "Since my husband passed in February." She twisted her wedding ring, a simple gold band now loose on her thin finger. Riley nodded, his eyes on the darkened windows. "Might I trouble you for a glass of water before I head to the hotel? Been a dusty ride." Vivian hesitated. Inviting a strange man inside was scandalous, but turning away someone who'd shown kindness seemed equally wrong. "Of course," she finally said, unlocking the door. The house was cold and dark. Vivian lit a lamp with shaking hands, illuminating the sparse furniture. A table, 2 chairs, a small settee, all that remained after selling most of their belongings to pay Thomas's medical debts. "Please sit," she offered, moving to the kitchen pump. "The water's clean here, at least." Riley remained standing, removing his hat to reveal thick, dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. He looked around 40, with lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled. "Nice place," he said, though they both knew it wasn't. Vivian handed him the water. It was, once. Riley drank deeply, then set the glass down. "Mrs. O'Malley, I don't mean to pry, but are you planning to stay in Sweetwater Creek?" The question caught her off guard. I haven't thought beyond tomorrow, to be honest. Times are hard everywhere, but especially here. Drought's got everyone struggling." He reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 more gold coins. "I won't be needing this bread. Haven't got anyone to share it with. But I'd feel better knowing you had something for tomorrow." Vivian stared at the money. $20 enough to keep her afloat for a month or more. Pride warred with necessity in her chest. "Mr. Ross, I cannot accept charity." "Not charity. An investment." He placed the coins on the table. "I'm looking for a place to winter my herd. Got 50 head of cattle that need grazing and shelter before I take them to market in spring. Your husband's land, does it have water access?" Vivian's heart raced. "Yes, the creek runs along the back 40 acres. But how did you know?" "Saw the deed notice at the bank when I was depositing my earnings. Thomas O'Malley's widow, holding 80 acres outside town." Riley's expression softened. "Mrs. O'Malley, I need land with water. You need money to keep this place. Might be we could help each other." Vivian's mind spun. This stranger, this cowboy, was offering her a lifeline. Yet experience had taught her that offers too good to be true usually were. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Riley's gaze was steady. "I know what it's like to lose everything, and I know good people when I meet them." He put his hat back on. "Think about it overnight. I'll come by tomorrow if that's agreeable." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Vivian stood in her cold kitchen, staring at the gold coins gleaming in the lamplight. For the first time in months, she slept without hunger pangs. The gold coins tucked safely under her pillow. Morning brought a pale sun and the unexpected sound of hammering. Vivian threw a shawl over her nightdress and peered out the bedroom window. There, in her yard, was Riley Ross, repairing her broken fence. A wagon stood nearby, loaded with lumber. Hastily dressing, Vivian stepped onto the porch. "Mr. Ross, what are you doing?" Riley looked up, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool morning. "Morning, Mrs. O'Malley. Hope I didn't wake you. Thought I'd make myself useful while you considered my proposal." "By rebuilding my fence?" He smiled, and Vivian's heart did a peculiar little skip. "Figure a proper fence is the first thing you need if we're going to run cattle on your land." "I haven't agreed to anything yet," she reminded him, though she couldn't help but be moved by his presumptuous optimism. "No, you haven't." He drove another nail with efficient force. "But I'm a betting man, and I'm betting you're practical enough to see a good opportunity." Vivian crossed her arms. "And if I refuse?" "Then you'll have a new fence." courtesy of a passing stranger. He set down his hammer. But I hope you'll consider it. My cattle need winter grazing, and I need a place to stay until spring. Your land has water, which makes it valuable. We could share the work and the profits when I drive them to market. And where would you stay? The barn burnt down last summer. Riley gestured to the wagon. Got canvas and poles to build a shelter for myself. I've slept under worse. The thought of this man living on her property raised a host of concerns. People will talk. People always do. Riley's expression turned serious. Mrs. O'Malley, I understand your reservations. I'm a stranger asking for your trust. But I give you my word as a man that my intentions are honorable. I need grazing land with water. You need income. It's a business arrangement, nothing more. But the warmth in his eyes suggested it could be something more, and that frightened Vivian almost as much as the prospect of losing her home. Let me think on it today, she said finally. And please, stop building my fence until I've decided. Riley nodded, setting down his tools. Fair enough. I'll be at the hotel if you need me. As he walked away, Vivian called after him. Mr. Ross, the bread, was it at least edible? He turned, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Best I've had in months, Mrs. O'Malley. Worth every penny. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But the kindness behind it warmed her more than the morning sun. Later that day, Vivian visited the bank to deposit the gold coins. Mr. Hargrove, the bank manager, raised his eyebrows at the sight of the money. Mrs. O'Malley, this is a pleasant surprise. I was beginning to wonder how you'd meet next week's payment. I sold some bread, she said simply. Must have been mighty fine bread. Hargrove's tone suggested disbelief. You should know, Mrs. O'Malley, that Mr. Fletcher has expressed interest in your property. He's prepared to offer a fair price enough to clear your debts and give you a fresh start elsewhere. Vivian stiffened. Edgar Fletcher owned half the businesses in town and had been trying to buy the O'Malley land since before Thomas's death. The creek that ran through their property would give him control of most of the water rights in the valley. My land is not for sale, Mr. Hargrove. With respect, Mrs. O'Malley, one good day of bread sales won't keep you afloat forever. The taxes come due quarterly, and there's the mortgage besides. A woman alone is perfectly capable of managing her affairs, Vivian interrupted, anger flaring. Please deposit the coins, Mr. Hargrove. As she left the bank, Vivian noticed Riley across the street, deep in conversation with Sheriff Donovan. The sheriff gestured animatedly while Riley listened, his expression grave. When he spotted Vivian, he excused himself and crossed to meet her. Mrs. O'Malley, I was just coming to find you. Is something wrong? Riley glanced back at the sheriff. The Murphy gang. Sheriff's got word they're planning something big, possibly in this area. He's advising folks to be vigilant, especially those living alone outside town. Fear knotted in Vivian's stomach. The O'Malley property would be an ideal place for outlaws to hole up, Riley finished. Isolated, with water access and good sight lines. He hesitated. Mrs. O'Malley, I don't mean to press you, but my offer stands. Having a man on your property might discourage unwanted visitors. The pragmatic part of Vivian recognized the sense in his words. The emotional part, the part that had been lonely for 8 long months, found comfort in the thought of another human presence nearby. Very well, Mr. Ross, we have a deal. You may graze your cattle on my land and build your shelter. She straightened her shoulders. But I have conditions. Riley's expression brightened. Name them. First, this is a business arrangement. You will pay a fair monthly rent for the grazing rights. Agreed. Second, you will respect my privacy and the boundaries of my home. Riley nodded solemnly. Of course. Third, Vivian continued, when spring comes and you drive your cattle to market, our arrangement ends. No obligations on either side. Something flickered in Riley's eyes, disappointment perhaps, but he nodded again. Those are reasonable terms, Mrs. O'Malley. Shall we shake on it? He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Vivian placed her smaller one in his. His palm was warm and calloused, engulfing hers completely. The simple human contact the first she'd experienced in months sent an unexpected tremor through her. To a successful partnership, Riley said, holding her hand a moment longer than necessary. Partnership, Vivian echoed, withdrawing her hand and trying to ignore the lingering sensation of his touch. 3 days later, Riley Ross drove his cattle onto the O'Malley property. 50 head of sturdy Hereford cattle spread across the back meadow, their red and white coats bright against the autumn-browned grass. Riley had 2 horses, a gray gelding he called Smoke, and a spirited bay mare named Ember, plus a mule that pulled a wagon loaded with supplies. True to his word, he built his shelter a respectable distance from the house, near the old corral that had miraculously survived the barn fire. The canvas structure was sturdy, with a small stovepipe protruding from the top. He rebuilt the corral, repaired more fencing, and cleared a fire break around both their shelters. Vivian watched his industry with growing admiration. He worked from dawn till dusk, stopping only for brief meals. Sometimes she would bring him coffee or food, telling herself it was simply being a good landlord, not because she enjoyed their brief conversations. A week into their arrangement, Riley appeared at her door just after sunset, his hat in his hands. "Mrs. O'Malley, I was wondering if you might join me for supper. I've shot a pair of rabbits, more than I can eat alone." Vivian hesitated. Dining alone with a man, even in an outdoor setting, pushed the boundaries of propriety. Yet the prospect of a meal she hadn't had to scrounge or stretch was tempting. "That's kind of you, Mr. Ross. Perhaps we could eat on the porch? The evening is mild enough." Relief washed over his features. "I'd be honored." The rabbit stew was rich and flavorful, simmered with wild onions and the last of Riley's preserved vegetables. They sat on her porch steps, bowls balanced on their knees, watching the sunset paint the western sky in magnificent hues. "How long have you been a cattleman, Mr. Ross?" Vivian asked, savoring the tender meat. "All my life, in some fashion. My father ran cattle in Texas. I started my own outfit about 15 years ago, after the war." "You fought?" Riley nodded, his expression distant. "Union cavalry. Not something I care to remember, but it gave me the money to buy my first herd." "And your family? Are they in Texas still?" A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my parents to fever in '65. No siblings, no wife." He glanced at her. "What about you, Mrs. O'Malley? How did you come to Sweetwater Creek?" Vivian sighed, setting down her empty bowl. Thomas had dreams of building a horse breeding operation. The land was cheap, the creek provided water, and the railroad was expanding this way. It seemed perfect. She twisted her wedding ring. Then the drought came. The horses got sick. Thomas worked himself to exhaustion trying to save them, which is why the influenza took him so hard. Riley's hand covered hers briefly. "I'm sorry." "We were married 6 years. No children." The admission still pained her. "Sometimes I think if we'd had a child, I'd have something of him left. Or another mouth to feed in hard times," Riley said gently. "The Lord works in ways we don't always understand." The simple faith in his words comforted her. "Do you believe that, Mr. Ross? After all you've seen?" Riley gazed at the darkening sky. "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" He collected their bowls. "Thank you for sharing the meal, Mrs. O'Malley, and the conversation." As he stood to leave, Vivian found herself reluctant to end the evening. "Mr. Ross, would you consider calling me Vivian? Mrs. O'Malley feels so formal for neighbors." A slow smile spread across his face. "I'd be honored, Vivian, and I'm Riley to my friends." "Are we friends, then?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. His blue eyes held hers. I'd like us to be. That night, Vivian lay awake, contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. A month ago, she'd been facing destitution. Now she had a paying tenant, repairs being made to her property, and something she hadn't expected: companionship. Riley Ross was unlike any man she'd met in Sweetwater Creek. There was a quiet strength to him, a dignity that didn't need to announce itself. And if she sometimes found herself watching him work, admiring the breadth of his shoulders or the grace with which he handled his horses well, that was natural appreciation, nothing more. November brought the first real cold snap. Frost rimed the grass each morning, and Vivian's little house grew increasingly difficult to heat. The woodpile dwindled alarmingly, and she found herself spending evenings huddled under quilts, trying to conserve fuel. One particularly bitter morning, Vivian woke to the sound of chopping. Outside, Riley was splitting logs, a substantial pile already stacked beside him. "What are you doing?" she called, wrapping her shawl tighter against the cold. Riley paused, leaning on the axe. "Noticed your wood pile was getting low. Thought I'd replenish it before the real cold sets in." "But where did you get all this wood?" "Fallen trees in the south meadow. Dead wood, but still good for burning." He swung the axe again, the blade biting cleanly through a log. "Should keep you warm through December at least." Vivian watched him work, mesmerized by the rhythm of his movements and the easy strength behind them. Thomas had been a slender man, more comfortable with ledgers than physical labor. Riley was built differently, solid and capable, his body shaped by years of outdoor work. "You didn't have to do this," she said when he paused again. Riley wiped sweat from his brow despite the cold. "Consider it part of my rent. Can't have my landlady freezing." His smile warmed her more than any fire could. "Besides, idle hands and all that. At least let me make you breakfast," Vivian offered. "I've got eggs from Mrs. Perkins's hens." Riley hesitated, then nodded. "I'd appreciate that." Over breakfast, Riley mentioned that he needed to ride into town for supplies. "I was wondering if you might need anything. Save you the trip in this cold." Vivian considered. She did need flour and coffee, but her funds were limited despite Riley's rent money. "I could use a few things, but—" "Make a list," Riley said, understanding her hesitation. "We can settle accounts when I return." While he was gone, Vivian cleaned her small house and found herself baking bread. Real bread this time, with proper flour and a pinch of sugar saved for special occasions. The familiar routine soothed her, and the scent of baking bread filled the house with warmth and memories. She was just taking the loaf from the oven when she heard riders approaching multiple horses, moving fast. Heart pounding, Vivian peered out the window. 3 men on horseback were circling her house, their faces obscured by bandanas. The Murphy gang. It had to be. Vivian's hands trembled as she reached for Thomas's old shotgun above the mantel. It wasn't loaded. She had no shells, but they wouldn't know that. A heavy fist pounded on her door. "Open up, lady. We know you're in there." Vivian gripped the shotgun tighter. "What do you want?" "Just some hospitality." The voice was slurred drunk or something worse. "Got a long ride ahead and need provisions. Open up nice and easy and nobody gets hurt." "My husband will be back any minute," Vivian lied, trying to sound confident. "He's gone to get the sheriff." Raucous laughter greeted this claim. "Nice try, widow woman. Everyone in town knows Thomas O'Malley's been dead since winter. Now open this door before we break it down." Terror closed Vivian's throat. They knew who she was. They'd been watching her. As the pounding on the door intensified, she backed toward the kitchen, searching desperately for a weapon, an escape, anything. The window exploded inward, showering glass across the floor. A bearded face appeared in the opening, grinning malevolently. "Come on out, Mrs. O'Malley. We just want to talk." The sound of a rifle shot cracked through the air. The bearded man yelped and disappeared from the window. More shots followed, and the pounding on the door ceased. "Vivian," Riley's voice. "Are you all right?" "Riley!" she cried, relief flooding through her. "Yes, I'm here. Stay inside. Get down." More gunfire erupted outside an exchange this time. Vivian crouched beside the kitchen table, heart hammering against her ribs. The shots grew more distant, as if the combatants were moving away from the house. Then silence. "Vivian?" Riley's voice came from the doorway, strained but steady. "It's safe now." She rose on shaky legs to find Riley standing in the open doorway, rifle in hand. Blood soaked his left sleeve. "You're hurt!" She rushed to him, all propriety forgotten. "Just a graze," he assured her, though his face was pale beneath his tan. "The Murphy boys. They've been watching the place, waiting for me to leave." His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry, Vivian. I put you in danger." "You saved me," she corrected, guiding him to a chair. "Let me see that arm." As she cleaned and bandaged his wound, a deep gouge that belied his "just a graze" assessment, Riley explained that he'd spotted the gang's tracks on his way back from town. "Circled wide and came up behind them. Got a clean shot at one, but the others escaped." "Will they come back?" Vivian couldn't keep the fear from her voice. Riley's expression hardened. "Not if they're smart. I recognized one of them, Frank Murphy himself. He doesn't like leaving witnesses." The implication hung between them. The gang wouldn't forget this encounter. "You should go to town," Riley said finally. "Stay at the hotel until this blows over." Vivian shook her head firmly. "This is my home. I won't be driven from it by criminals." She finished tying off the bandage. "Besides, I have you to protect me, don't I?" Something shifted in Riley's eyes, surprise, respect, and something warmer. "Yes, madam, you do." That night, despite Vivian's protests, Riley slept on her porch, rifle across his lap. The temperature dropped below freezing, and Vivian lay awake, thinking of him out in the cold because of her stubbornness. Near dawn, she could bear it no longer. Wrapping herself in her robe, she opened the door to find Riley still vigilant, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You'll freeze to death." Riley attempted a smile, though his lips looked blue. "Been through worse. Come inside. The settee isn't much, but it's warmer than the porch." When he hesitated, she added, "Please, Riley. I can't have your death on my conscience." Reluctantly, he followed her inside. The small settee was barely long enough for his frame, but the relief in his eyes as he felt the warmth of the dying fire was worth any impropriety. "Just until sunrise," he insisted, settling onto the cushions. "Of course," Vivian agreed, though they both knew the danger wouldn't pass with daylight. She returned to her bedroom but left the door ajar, scandalous by any standard, but these were extraordinary circumstances. As she drifted to sleep, the knowledge that Riley Ross was just a room away brought a comfort she hadn't felt since Thomas died. Sheriff Donovan arrived the next morning, alerted by a neighbor who'd heard the gunfire. He surveyed the broken window and the bloodstains in the yard with a grim expression. "Frank Murphy doesn't take kindly to being shot at," he warned, "and that brother of his, Jesse, is even worse. They won't forget this." "What would you have us do, Sheriff?" Riley asked, his arm now properly bandaged by the doctor who'd accompanied Donovan. "Abandon the property?" The sheriff sighed heavily. "Might not be a bad idea, at least until we catch them. I've wired for federal marshals, but it could be weeks before they arrive." "I'm not leaving," Vivian said firmly. "This land is all I have left." Donovan looked between them, his expression troubled. "Then you'd best not be alone, Mrs. O'Malley. Either come to town or—" He hesitated, glancing at Riley. "I'll be staying in the house until this is resolved," Riley said quietly. "On the settee, with all propriety observed." Vivian felt heat rise to her cheeks but nodded in agreement. "Mr. Ross has been a perfect gentleman, Sheriff," My reputation will survive. After the sheriff left, promising to send deputies to patrol the area, Riley and Vivian faced each other across the kitchen table. You don't have to do this, Vivian said. It's not your fight. Riley's expression was solemn. It became my fight when they threatened you. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Vivian, I need to tell you something. The Murphy gang, they're not just after random properties. They're after mine. What do you mean? Riley sighed heavily. My cattle drive last spring, the Murphy boys tried to rustle my herd near the Powder River. We fought them off, but I killed their youngest brother in the process. It was self-defense, but Frank swore vengeance. His fingers tightened around hers. I didn't know they'd tracked me here. I thought I'd lost them in Montana. Understanding dawned. So it's not me they want. It's you. I've put you in danger, Riley admitted, his eyes clouded with guilt. If I'd known they were following me, I never would have brought my troubles to your door. Vivian should have been angry. This man had brought outlaws to her property, endangered her life. Yet looking at his anguished expression, she found she couldn't blame him. We're both in this now, she said finally, so we'll face it together. For the next 2 weeks, they lived in a state of constant vigilance. Riley moved his bedroll into the front room, sleeping near the door with his rifle close at hand. During the day, he tended the cattle but stayed within sight of the house. Vivian kept the shotgun loaded now, with shells Riley had purchased in town. Despite the tension, or perhaps because of it, they grew closer. Long evenings were spent in conversation by the fire, sharing stories of their lives before Sweetwater Creek. Riley told her about his years driving cattle across the Chisholm Trail, about the beauty of the open plains and the stars that seemed close enough to touch on clear nights. Vivian shared memories of her childhood in Missouri, of meeting Thomas at a church social when she was 18, of their dreams for the future. She found herself laughing more than she had in months, discovering a sense of humor in Riley that his serious demeanor belied. One evening, as the first snow of winter dusted the ground outside, Riley asked about her baking. Thomas always said I had a gift for bread, Vivian admitted. Before things got bad, I used to sell loaves to half the town. That loaf I bought, was it really your last? Vivian nodded, remembering her desperation that day. Last flower, last kindling. If you hadn't come along. She trailed off, unwilling to contemplate how differently things might have turned out. Riley was silent for a long moment. I almost didn't stop, he confessed. Was heading straight for the saloon after 3 days in the saddle. But something about you standing there so proudly despite everything, I couldn't pass by. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. His voice was soft. Vivian, A noise outside interrupted him, a branch snapping in the frozen night. Instantly, Riley was on his feet, rifle in hand. Stay here, he whispered, moving to the window. Vivian's heart raced as Riley peered cautiously through the curtains. After a tense moment, his shoulders relaxed slightly. Just a deer, he said, turning back to her. Browsing in what's left of your garden. Relief washed over her, followed by an unexpected wave of disappointment. Whatever Riley had been about to say remained unspoken, the moment lost. As November gave way to December, Sweetwater Creek prepared for Christmas. Despite their isolation and the lingering threat of the Murphy gang, Vivian found herself looking forward to the holiday for the first time since Thomas's death. Riley suggested they ride into town together for supplies, arguing that the gang was less likely to attack when they were both armed and vigilant. The outing was a welcome break from the tension of the past weeks. Sweetwater Creek had transformed itself with garlands of pine and red ribbons decorating the main street. Children darted between adults, their excitement palpable despite the hard times many families faced. As they tied their horses outside the general store, Vivian noticed the curious glances from townspeople. Word had spread about their living arrangement, and she could almost hear the whispered speculations. "Ignore them," Riley murmured, offering his arm as they climbed the steps to the store. Their opinions don't matter. But they did matter, at least to Vivian. Her reputation had been her armor since Thomas's death. The one thing that kept her from being seen as vulnerable or desperate despite her circumstances. Inside the store, Mrs. Peterson, the proprietor's wife, greeted them with barely concealed curiosity. "Mrs. O'Malley, Mr. Ross, shopping for Christmas, are we?" "Just supplies," Vivian replied, trying to maintain her dignity. While Riley discussed feed prices with Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Peterson leaned closer to Vivian. "The whole town's talking, you know. A widow living unchaperoned with a strange cowboy." Her eyes gleamed with malicious interest. "Is there to be a wedding before the scandal grows too large?" Vivian felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Mr. Ross is my tenant and protector, nothing more. The Murphy gang." "Yes, we've heard that explanation." Mrs. Peterson's smile was cold. "Though some say it's mighty convenient, this gang that no one else has seen. Sheriff Donovan was at my property. He saw the evidence himself." "Of course, dear." The older woman patted Vivian's hand condescendingly. "I'm sure it's all completely innocent." Before Vivian could respond, Riley appeared at her side, his expression making it clear he'd overheard. "Mrs. Peterson," he said, his voice deceptively pleasant, "I understand gossip is the lifeblood of small towns, but I'd appreciate if you'd direct your speculations elsewhere. Mrs. O'Malley is a lady of impeccable character who has shown extraordinary courage in difficult circumstances." Mrs. Peterson flushed. "I meant no offense." "Then perhaps you should choose your words more carefully." Riley placed a protective hand at the small of Vivian's back. "We'll take our business to Mr. Whitaker's store from now on." Outside, Vivian couldn't decide whether to be mortified or grateful. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Riley's jaw was set. "I won't have them slandering you because of me." "It's not your fault. People will talk regardless." Riley stopped walking, turning to face her in the middle of the street. "Vivian, I've been thinking. There's a simple solution to this problem." Her heart skipped a beat. "What's that?" "Marry me." The words hung between them, stark and unexpected. Vivian stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What did you say?" Riley took her gloved hands in his. "Marry me. It would protect your reputation, give us both security, solve several problems at once." The practical nature of the proposal, so devoid of romance or declaration, doused Vivian's momentary hope like cold water. "That's your idea of a marriage proposal? A practical solution to a problem?" Riley's eyes widened at her tone. "I didn't mean—" "I believe you've made yourself perfectly clear, Mr. Ross." Vivian withdrew her hands, ignoring the curious stares of passers-by. "I survived 8 months of widowhood without compromising myself. I don't need to enter a marriage of convenience to preserve my good name." Hurt flashed across Riley's face. "Vivian, please." "I'll wait by the horses." She turned and walked away, blinking back unexpected tears. The ride home was conducted in strained silence. Riley made several attempts at conversation, but Vivian responded with single words or not at all. By the time they reached the house, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted landscape. As Riley helped her down from the mare, his hands lingering at her waist, Vivian finally met his eyes. "I appreciate your concern for my reputation, Mr. Ross, but I would rather face the gossips alone than marry a man who sees me as a problem to be solved." Riley's expression crumpled. "That's not what I meant at all." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not good with words, Vivian, never have been. What I should have said was—" The crack of a rifle shot cut through the air. Riley's body jerked, and he stumbled forward against Vivian. "Riley!" she screamed, catching him as he collapsed. Blood bloomed across his coat, staining the blue wool crimson. Another shot splintered the porch railing inches from where they stood. With strength born of terror, Vivian dragged Riley toward the house as more shots peppered the ground around them. They tumbled through the door together, Vivian kicking it shut behind them. "Riley, oh God, Riley, stay with me," she pleaded, rolling him onto his back. His eyes fluttered open. Pain etched in every line of his face. "The Murphy gang," he gasped, "must have been watching, waiting for us to return." Vivian tore open his coat to find blood soaking his shirt just below the shoulder. "How bad is it?" "Not fatal," Riley managed, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "But they'll be coming. Need to get ready." As if to confirm his words, a voice called from outside. "Come on out, Ross. We know you're in there." Vivian's mind raced. Riley was in no condition to fight, and help was miles away. "What do we do?" Riley gripped her hand, his strength fading but his eyes clear. "Get my rifle, barricade the door. They'll try to burn us out when shooting doesn't work." Working quickly despite her terror, Vivian dragged furniture against the door and windows. She retrieved both rifles and the shotgun, positioning them where Riley could reach them from his position on the floor. "How many?" she asked, peering cautiously through a crack in the curtains. "At least 3, Riley said, his voice strained as she pressed a cloth against his wound. "Frank and Jesse for sure. Maybe others." Another volley of shots hit the house, one bullet punching through the thin wall near the fireplace. Vivian ducked instinctively. "They're getting bolder," Riley observed grimly. "Won't be long before they rush the house." Vivian's hands trembled as she reloaded the shotgun. "I've never shot anyone." Riley's eyes met hers, steady despite his pain. "Aim for the center, don't hesitate. It's us or them now." A flaming arrow struck the roof, the fire catching quickly in the dry wood shingles. Smoke began to filter through the ceiling as more flaming projectiles hit their mark. "They're trying to smoke us out," Riley said, struggling to sit up. "Help me to the window." Together, they positioned themselves at different windows, weapons ready. Outside, shadowy figures moved between the trees, occasionally visible in the glow from the burning roof. "When I give the signal," Riley instructed, "fire at anything that moves. Don't stop until your gun is empty." Vivian nodded, terror and determination warring within her. The smell of smoke grew stronger, and she could hear the crackle of flames above them. "Now!" Riley shouted, firing his rifle in quick succession. Vivian pulled the trigger, the shotgun's recoil nearly knocking her backward. Outside, a man screamed in pain. She reloaded with shaking hands and fired again into the darkness. Riley continued shooting methodically, each shot placed with deadly precision despite his injury. 2 bodies lay motionless in the yard, but at least one attacker remained, judging by the continued gunfire from the tree line. "We need to get out," Riley gasped, the exertion clearly taxing his wounded body. "Roof's going to collapse soon." As if summoned by his words, a section of ceiling gave way, showering them with burning debris. Vivian beat out the embers that landed on Riley's coat, panic rising in her throat. "The back door," she suggested. "If we can reach the horses." A bullet shattered the window beside her, spraying glass across her face. Vivian cried out, a shard slicing her cheek. "Vivian!" Riley lurched toward her, his face ashen with pain and fear. "I'm all right," she assured him, wiping blood from her face. "Just a cut." Another section of roof collapsed, blocking access to the back door. Smoke filled the room, making it difficult to breathe or see. "We have to go out the front," Riley decided, his voice hoarse from the smoke. "Whoever's left will be expecting us to try the back." "You can barely stand," Vivian protested. "No choice." Riley gripped her arm. "Listen to me, Vivian. When we go out, run for the horses. Don't stop. Don't look back." "I'll cover you." "I'm not leaving you." "You have to." His eyes, fierce with determination, held hers. One of us needs to make it to town, bring help. Before she could argue further, a voice called from outside. Ross, send out the woman and we'll let her live. It's you we want. Riley's expression hardened. Frank Murphy. Always was a liar. The roof groaned ominously above them. They were out of time. On three, Riley whispered, positioning himself by the door, rifle ready. 1, 2, 3. Vivian shoved aside the barricade and wrenched open the door. Riley fired immediately. The shot answered by a cry of pain from the darkness. They burst onto the porch together, Riley pushing Vivian ahead of him as more shots rang out. A bullet struck the porch post beside Vivian's head as she ran toward the corral where their horses waited, wide-eyed with fear from the gunfire and flames. Behind her, she heard Riley's rifle fire twice more, then a terrible silence. Glancing back, she saw him sprawled on the ground halfway to the corral, motionless. Riley! Forgetting his instructions, Vivian turned back, running to his side. Riley's eyes fluttered open as she reached him. Told you to run, he gasped. Not without you. She pulled at his arm, trying to help him up. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both freeze. Vivian reached for Riley's fallen rifle, prepared to make their last stand together. But the riders that emerged from the darkness weren't the Murphy gang. Sheriff Donovan led a group of 6 armed men, their weapons trained on the burning property. Mrs. O'Malley, Ross, Donovan called. You folks all right? Relief made Vivian's knees buckle. Sheriff, Riley's been shot. The next hours passed in a blur. Donovan's men extinguished what they could of the house fire while the sheriff and another man helped get Riley to town. 2 of the Murphy gang lay dead in the yard, Frank Murphy himself and a man Vivian didn't recognize. Jesse Murphy had escaped, wounded, but alive. At the doctor's office in Sweetwater Creek, Vivian paced anxiously while Dr. Bennett extracted the bullet from Riley's shoulder. When she was finally allowed to see him, pale but conscious on the examining table, the emotion of the night caught up with her. You could have been killed, she said, tears streaming down her face. Riley reached for her hand. His grip weak but steady. So could you. Shouldn't have come back for me. Did you really think I would leave you there? A small smile touched his lips. Hoped you had more sense. Well, I didn't. Vivian squeezed his hand. And I'd do it again. Dr. Bennett cleared his throat from the doorway. Mrs. O'Malley, Mr. Ross needs rest. You can see him in the morning. Reluctantly, Vivian released Riley's hand. I'll be back first thing. Vivian, Riley called as she reached the door. About what I said earlier, my proposal. It came out all wrong. This isn't the time. It is. His eyes, despite the pain medication, were clear and intent. Because I might not have gotten another chance to say it right. I didn't ask you to marry me as a solution to a problem. I asked because somewhere between that first loaf of bread and today, I fell in love with you. Vivian's heart seemed to stop. You what? I love you. Riley's voice was soft but certain. Your strength, your kindness, your determination, the way you refused to give up even when everything was against you, the way you look in the morning sunlight, everything. He swallowed hard. I'm not asking for an answer now. Just wanted you to know the truth. In case you didn't survive? Vivian moved back to his side, her throat tight with emotion. Riley Ross, you are not allowed to die. Not when I've just found you. His eyes widened. Does that mean? It means we'll talk when you're better. She bent and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. Rest now. As she left the doctor's office, Vivian's mind whirled with the events of the day, the proposal, the attack, Riley's declaration of love. Outside, dawn was breaking over Sweetwater Creek, the sky lightening to a pale, hopeful blue. Sheriff Donovan approached, his expression grave. Mrs. O'Malley, I'm afraid your house... Well, there wasn't much left to save. Vivian nodded, having expected as much. What about Riley's cattle? Scattered but alive, from what my deputies could tell. We'll help round them up once things settle. Donovan hesitated. Madam, I need to ask, what are your plans now? The hotel's got rooms? Or there are families who'd take you in? The question gave Vivian pause. Her home was gone, her possessions reduced to ashes. Yet strangely, she felt no despair. I still have my land, Sheriff, and the spring will come. Yes, madam, but winter's barely started. You can't rebuild before spring. Then I'll make other arrangements. Her thoughts turned to Riley, to his unexpected declaration. Sheriff, do you know if Reverend Phillips is in town this week? Donovan blinked at the apparent change of subject. Arrived yesterday for his monthly visit, staying at the boarding house. Thank you. Vivian straightened her shoulders, decision made. I believe I'll need to speak with him today. 3 days later, Riley Ross was well enough to sit up in bed, though Dr. Bennett insisted he remain under observation for at least another week. The bullet had missed any vital organs but had caused significant blood loss and tissue damage. When Vivian entered his room that morning, Riley noticed immediately that something was different. She wore a new dress blue calico that brought out the warm brown of her eyes, and her hair was arranged more carefully than usual. You look beautiful, he said, his voice still rough from smoke inhalation. Vivian smiled, a flush coloring her cheeks. Thank you. How are you feeling? Better every day. He studied her expression, trying to gauge her mood. Donovan told me the house is gone. Yes. Vivian sat in the chair beside his bed. But the land remains. And the creek. Riley nodded, guilt weighing heavily on him. Vivian, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't brought the Murphy gang to your door... Stop. She placed her hand over his. You didn't know they were following you. And if you hadn't been there, I might have faced them alone someday. Her expression softened. Besides, it's just a house. It can be rebuilt. With what? Riley asked gently. Your savings, your husband's land, it's all you had. Not all. Vivian's eyes held his. I have a business proposal for you, Mr. Ross. Riley raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite his concern. I'm listening. Your cattle survived the attack. You still need grazing land with water access. I still own that land. She took a deep breath. I propose a partnership, equal shares in both the land and the cattle. Together, we rebuild a house, barns, corrals. Come spring, we drive the herd to market together and use the profits to expand. Riley stared at her, processing the unexpected offer. A business partnership? To start with. Vivian's hand tightened on his. But I was hoping it might become something more, if your offer from the other day still stands. Hope bloomed in Riley's chest. Are you saying... I'm saying that I love you too, Riley Ross. The words came easily, as if she'd been waiting to say them for a long time. I didn't expect to. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. But then you came along with your kindness and your strength, and somehow you made me believe in second chances. Riley brought her hand to his lips, kissing her palm. Vivian O'Malley, will you marry me? Not for convenience or propriety, but because I love you and can't imagine my life without you? Tears shimmered in her eyes. Yes. Joy, pure and overwhelming, flooded through him. When? A mischievous smile curved Vivian's lips. Actually, I've already spoken to Reverend Phillips. He's agreed to perform the ceremony as soon as you're well enough to stand. Riley laughed, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. You were that certain of my answer? I was certain of my heart. Vivian leaned forward and, for the first time, pressed her lips to his in a sweet, gentle kiss that promised more to come. And I thought perhaps we might be married before Christmas. Riley pulled her closer, heedless of his injury. Mrs. O'Malley, I believe that's the best idea I've heard all year. They were married 2 weeks later in the small Sweetwater Creek church, with Sheriff Donovan and Dr. Bennett as witnesses. Vivian wore a simple cream-colored dress purchased with some of Riley's cattle money, and Riley stood tall and proud despite the sling supporting his healing shoulder. I, Riley James Ross, take thee, Vivian Elizabeth O'Malley, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he vowed, his voice steady and sure. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. As Vivian repeated the same words, her eyes never leaving his, Riley marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A loaf of bread, a desperate widow, a wandering cowboy, such simple beginnings for a love that now seemed as vast as the Wyoming sky. By the power vested in me, Reverend Phillips intoned, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Riley gathered Vivian close, his good arm encircling her waist, and kissed her with all the love and promise he held in his heart. That night, in their room above the hotel, Riley held his new wife close, their bodies fitting together as if made for each other. I never thought I'd find this, he confessed, trailing his fingers along the curve of her shoulder. A home, someone to share it with. Vivian nestled against him, her hand resting over his heart. When Thomas died, I thought my chance at happiness died with him. I'm glad I was wrong. So am I. Riley kissed her again, marveling at the softness of her lips, the warmth of her skin against his. I have something for you. A wedding gift. He reached for his coat hanging nearby and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. It's not much, but... Vivian unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small book with a leather cover. Opening it, she found it filled with blank pages save for an inscription on the first page. For my wife, to write our story as it unfolds. With all my love, Riley. Tears filled Vivian's eyes. It's perfect. Riley brushed a strand of hair from her face. I thought you might record recipes. For when you start baking again? You want me to bake? I want you to do whatever makes you happy. His expression grew serious. That loaf of bread you sold me, it was the beginning of everything good in my life. Seems fitting that bread should be part of our future, too. Vivian smiled, a plan already forming in her mind. Perhaps not just for us. Sweetwater Creek could use a proper bakery. Mrs. Ross, Riley said, testing the new name with evident pleasure. I believe you may be onto something there. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it new beginnings. The new house on the O'Malley Ross property stood completed, larger and sturdier than the original. Behind it, a barn and corrals housed Riley's expanding herd, now nearly 100 head strong after a successful breeding season. But the most significant addition stood in town. Vivian's Bakery, a small but thriving establishment that sold not just bread, but pies, cakes, and cookies to the residents of Sweetwater Creek. The drought had broken over the winter, bringing hope and prosperity back to the region, and with it a renewed appetite for simple pleasures like fresh baked goods. Sold out again, Vivian announced happily as Riley entered the shop one afternoon in May. Third day this week. Riley smiled, pride evident in his expression as he leaned across the counter to kiss his wife. Told you your bread was worth its weight in gold. Speaking of gold, Vivian said, reaching beneath the counter. The profits from this week. Enough to order that new breeding bull you've been wanting? Riley pocketed the money with a grateful nod. Their partnership, both business and personal, had flourished beyond either's expectations. The cattle operation provided steady income, while the bakery brought in additional funds and gave Vivian a purpose that fulfilled her beyond mere survival. Got news from Sheriff Donovan, Riley said, his expression turning serious. They caught Jesse Murphy trying to rob a bank in Cheyenne. He won't be troubling us again. Relief washed over Vivian. Though the Murphy threat had receded with time and distance, the memory of that terrifying night still haunted her dreams occasionally. That's good news indeed. As they closed the shop together, walking arm in arm toward their horses tethered outside, Vivian felt a familiar flutter in her stomach. Not anxiety this time, but excitement. "Riley," she said as he helped her mount, "there's something I need to tell you." He looked up at her, his hand lingering on her waist. "What is it?" Vivian placed her hand over his, guiding it to rest against her still flat abdomen. "We're going to need to build another bedroom. By winter." Understanding dawned in Riley's eyes, followed by joy so profound it took his breath away. "A baby? You're sure?" "Dr. Bennett confirmed it yesterday." Vivian's smile was radiant. "Our family is growing, Mr. Ross." Riley whooped with delight, startling several passers-by as he swung himself into the saddle beside her. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." As they rode home together in the golden afternoon light, Vivian reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From desperation to prosperity, from loneliness to love, from a single loaf of bread to a future rich with promise. "What are you thinking?" Riley asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Vivian smiled, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. "I was thinking about that day we met. How close I came to giving up before you appeared." "Providence," Riley said simply. "Someone up there knew we needed each other." "More than needed," Vivian corrected. "Belong together." Riley reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "Always will, Mrs. Ross. That's a promise." As their property came into view, the white house with blue shutters, the red barn, the cattle grazing peacefully by the creek, Vivian felt a sense of completion she had never known before. This was home. This was family. This was love in its purest, most unexpected form. "Race you to the house?" Riley challenged, his eyes twinkling with the boyish enthusiasm that still surprised and delighted her. "You're on!" Vivian laughed, spurring her horse forward. Together they galloped toward home, toward their future, the setting sun casting their shadows long across the land that had brought them together, a widow with her last loaf of bread, and the cowboy who had given her his heart.